The sound of laughter echoed through my sister's dining room, but it wasn't the warm kind that brings families together. It was the sharp, cutting kind that leaves wounds you never quite forget. My name is Vanessa, I'm 53 years old, and I thought I knew what betrayal felt like until that Tuesday evening in March, when my own family showed me just how wrong I could be. I had arrived at my younger sister Denise's house for what I thought was going to be a regular family dinner. The smell of her famous pot roast filled the air, and I could hear my nephews playing video games upstairs. Everything seemed normal until I walked into the dining room and saw them all huddled around Denise's laptop, pointing at the screen and talking in excited whispers. "What's all the excitement about?" I asked, setting down the peach cobbler I'd brought to share. The conversation stopped so abruptly, you could have heard a pin drop. My brother Kenneth looked up first, his expression shifting from excitement to something that looked almost guilty. My sister Denise quickly closed the laptop, but not before I caught a glimpse of what looked like a resort website. "Oh, it's nothing," Denise said, waving her hand dismissively. "Just looking at some pictures online." But Kenneth had never been good at keeping secrets, and my other brother Marcus started grinning in that way that meant trouble was coming. I'd seen that same grin when we were kids, and he was about to tell Mama about something I'd done wrong. "Come on, tell her," Marcus said, nudging Kenneth with his elbow. "She's going to find out anyway." "Find out what?" I asked, feeling that familiar knot starting to form in my stomach. The same knot I'd felt 3 years ago when they'd planned Mama's birthday party without telling me, claiming they'd forgotten to send me the details until the day after. Denise shot Marcus a warning look, but he ignored it completely. He'd always been the one to stir up trouble and then act innocent when things got messy. "We're planning a family reunion vacation," he announced proudly. "Found this amazing resort in the mountains. 3 days and 2 nights, all the family together for the first time in years." The knot in my stomach tightened. "That sounds wonderful," I said carefully. "When were you thinking?" "Memorial Day weekend." Kenneth jumped in, his enthusiasm returning. "The place has everything, a lake, hiking trails, even a spa, and they have these family suites that can sleep up to 8 people each." I waited for the part where they asked if I wanted to join them. I waited for them to pull out the laptop again and show me the pictures. I waited for someone to ask about my schedule or whether I could get the time off work. Instead, there was another one of those awkward silences. "So," I said slowly, "I guess you want to know if I can make it." That's when the laughter started, not from everyone at first, just a little chuckle from Marcus that grew when Denise tried to shush him. Then Kenneth started snickering, and before I knew it, all 3 of my siblings were laughing like I just told the funniest joke they'd ever heard. "Vanessa," Denise said, wiping tears from her eyes, "this is a family vacation." "I am family," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You know what she means," Marcus said, still grinning. "This is for people with actual families, kids, spouses, you know, people who have somebody." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks and had to grip the back of a dining room chair to steady myself. "I have family," I said. "You're my family." "Of course we are," Kenneth said quickly, shooting an annoyed look at Marcus. "But this vacation is specifically for the families with children. My kids, Denise's boys, Marcus, and Janet's little girl. We figured it might be boring for you being around all the kids and family activities. Plus," Denise added, her tone becoming more condescending, "it's already pretty expensive splitting the costs 4 ways. Adding another person would just make it more complicated for everyone." I stood there in that dining room, surrounded by my 3 siblings, and felt more alone than I had since my divorce was finalized 8 years ago. They weren't just excluding me from a vacation, they were telling me I didn't belong because I didn't have children, because I didn't have a husband, because I was somehow less than a complete family. "I could contribute my share," I said quietly. "I have money saved." More laughter. This time it was cruel and deliberate. Vanessa, Marcus said, shaking his head. You work at a community center. We're talking about a pretty upscale place here. No offense, but I don't think you understand what kind of money we're talking about. My job as a program coordinator at the Westside Community Center paid $42,000 a year. It wasn't a fortune, but I lived modestly, had paid off my house, and had been careful with my money since the divorce. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my grandmother had left me something when she passed away 2 years ago, something I'd never mentioned to anyone in the family. Grandma Rose had been a quiet woman who cleaned houses for wealthy families her entire life. She'd lived in the same small apartment for 40 years, wore the same 3 church dresses in rotation, and clipped coupons like they were made of gold. What no one realized was that she'd been investing every spare penny she could find for 50 years, building a portfolio that grew steadily while she lived like she had nothing. When the lawyer called me after her funeral, I thought there had been some mistake. Grandma Rose had left me everything, her life insurance, her savings, and an investment account worth $875,000. She'd chosen me, she'd written in her letter, because I was the only one in the family who had ever visited her regularly, without asking for money, who had brought her groceries when she was sick, who had sat with her and listened to her stories about the old days. I'd kept that inheritance quiet, not out of shame but out of caution. I'd seen what money could do to families, how it could turn love into greed and siblings into strangers. I'd watched my own family become petty and competitive over the smallest things, who got mama's good china, who inherited daddy's tools, who got to host Christmas dinner. I wasn't about to give them a reason to see me as a bank account instead of a sister. But standing there in Denise's dining room, listening to them laugh about my financial limitations, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and fresh, but underneath it was something else, something that felt like determination mixed with righteous anger. "What's the name of this resort?" I asked. "Why?" Denise asked suspiciously. "Just curious. If it's as amazing as you say, maybe I'll look it up online." Kenneth pulled out his phone and scrolled through his notes. "Pine Ridge Mountain Resort," he said. "It's about 3 hours north of here. Really exclusive place, they only take a limited number of guests at a time." I nodded and filed that information away. "Well," I said, picking up my peach cobbler, "I hope you all have a wonderful time." "You're not mad, are you?" Denise asked, though her tone suggested she didn't really care about the answer. "Why would I be mad?" I replied. "Like you said, it's for people with actual families." I left that house with my dignity intact, but inside I was burning. I drove home to my small but comfortable house on Elm Street, parked in my driveway, and sat in my car for a full 10 minutes before I trusted myself to go inside. My house had been my sanctuary since the divorce. It was a 1920s bungalow with hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, and a kitchen I'd renovated myself with help from YouTube videos and sheer determination. The mortgage was paid off, the garden was thriving, and every room reflected my taste and no one else's. It was proof that a woman could build a good life on her own, even if her family didn't see it that way. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop. The Pine Ridge Mountain Resort website loaded slowly, but when it finally appeared on my screen, I had to admit my siblings had good taste. The place was gorgeous, a sprawling complex of log cabins and a main lodge nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains, with a crystal-clear lake reflecting the peaks in the distance. The family suites they'd mentioned were indeed impressive, with multiple bedrooms, full kitchens, and private decks overlooking the water. The resort offered hiking trails, boat rentals, a full-service spa, and a restaurant that had apparently won awards for its farm-to-table cuisine. There was even a kids' club with organized activities and a playground. I scrolled through the photo gallery, imagining my nephews splashing in the lake while my siblings relaxed on the deck with drinks in their hands. I pictured them sharing meals in the restaurant, laughing over inside jokes, creating memories that would last a lifetime, memories that wouldn't include me. The rates were posted clearly on the website. For Memorial Day weekend, a family suite ran $850 per night, with a minimum 2-night stay. Add in meals, activities, and miscellaneous expenses, and they were probably looking at around $1,500 per family for the whole weekend. Split 4 ways like Kenneth had mentioned, that was still a significant chunk of money, but not impossible for people with decent jobs and some planning. What stung was the assumption that I couldn't afford it, the casual dismissal of my financial capabilities based on my job title and single status. The implication that I was somehow a charity case who couldn't pull her own weight. I closed the laptop and tried to focus on other things. I had a book to finish, laundry to fold, and lesson plans to review for the literacy classes I taught at the community center. But my mind kept drifting back to that dining room, to the sound of their laughter, to the way they'd looked at me like I was something to be pitied. Over the next few days, I found myself thinking about Pine Ridge Mountain Resort at odd moments. While I was teaching Mrs. Cotta Henderson how to sound out words in her reading class, while I was organizing supplies for the after-school program, while I was grocery shopping and noticed I was buying ingredients for one instead of a family. By Friday, I'd made a decision that would have shocked my siblings if they'd known about it. I called the resort directly and spoke to a woman named Amanda in their guest services department. "I'm interested in booking a family suite for Memorial Day weekend," I told her. "I'm so sorry," Amanda said, "but we're completely booked for that weekend. We actually have a waiting list in case of cancellations, but I wouldn't want to get your hopes up." "What if someone wanted to book the entire resort?" I asked. "Is that possible?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Well, yes, we do offer exclusive bookings for special events, corporate retreats, wedding parties, that sort of thing. But the cost would be quite substantial." "How substantial?" Another pause. "For Memorial Day weekend, a full resort buyout would be $58,000. That includes all accommodations, meals for up to 60 guests, and full access to all amenities and activities." $58,000. Less than 7% of Grandma Rose's inheritance. "Would that guarantee that no other guests could book rooms for that weekend?" I asked. "Absolutely. You would have complete privacy and exclusive use of all facilities." "And what would be required to secure that booking?" "A 50% deposit, with the balance due 30 days before arrival. We would also need to discuss catering preferences, activity planning, and any special accommodations for your group." I took a deep breath. I'd like to make that reservation. The process took about an hour. Amanda was professional and thorough, walking me through every detail of what a full resort buyout would include. Gourmet meals prepared by their award-winning chef, unlimited access to all recreational activities, dedicated staff for any special needs, and complete privacy for me and my guests. The only problem was that I didn't have any guests. That's when I got an idea that was either brilliant or completely crazy, depending on how you looked at it. I started making phone calls. First to my cousin Teresa, who lived 2 states away and had always been the black sheep of the family like me. She was divorced, no kids, and worked as a freelance graphic designer. She'd been excluded from family events for years because she was too political and didn't fit in with the family values. "You want to do what?" Teresa asked when I explained my plan. "I want to throw a family reunion that actually celebrates the family members who usually get overlooked," I said. Teresa was quiet for a moment. "How much is this going to cost you?" "Don't worry about the money. I've got it covered." "Vanessa, this is either the most brilliant revenge plot I've ever heard, or you've completely lost your mind." "Maybe both," I admitted. Next, I called my great-aunt Vivian, who was 78 years old and sharp as a tack. She'd been written off by most of the family as difficult because she spoke her mind and didn't apologize for having opinions. She lived alone in a senior apartment complex and rarely got invited to family gatherings because she made people uncomfortable with her honesty. "They said what to you?" Aunt Vivian asked when I told her about the dining room incident. "That the vacation was for people with actual families." "Well, I never," she said, and I could practically hear her getting fired up through the phone. Those children have forgotten where they came from and who raised them to be decent human beings. I called my cousin Jerome, who had moved to California years ago and rarely came back to visit because he said the family was too judgmental. He was openly gay, worked as a nurse, and had been in a committed relationship with his partner David for 12 years. The family tolerated him at Christmas and ignored him the rest of the year. "You're kidding me," Jerome said. "You actually booked the whole resort?" "Every room, every cabin, every dining table," I confirmed. "And they have no idea?" "Not a clue." "Oh, honey, this is going to be good." I spent the next week reaching out to family members who had been marginalized, overlooked, or excluded over the years. My second cousin Brenda, who had struggled with addiction and been shunned by the family during her recovery. My Uncle Robert's widow, Aunt Catherine, who had been dropped from family events after he passed away because she wasn't blood family. My cousin Michael's ex-wife Sharon, who had been like a sister to me, but got cut off from everyone after their messy divorce, even though she was the mother of their 2 children. Each conversation was similar: shock, disbelief, and then growing excitement as they realized I was serious about creating an inclusive family gathering that celebrated the people who usually got left behind. "But what about your siblings?" Aunt Catherine asked. "Won't they be upset when they find out what you've done?" "I'm counting on it," I said. By the end of 2 weeks, I had commitments from 16 people who were thrilled to be included in a family reunion where they were wanted and welcomed. Teresa was driving in from Tennessee with her teenage niece, who was also considered the family rebel. Aunt Vivian was taking a bus from the senior center. Jerome and David were flying in from Los Angeles. The group was diverse, interesting, and full of people who had stories to tell and loved to share. The best part was that I hadn't lied to anyone about what I was doing. I told them exactly why I was organizing this gathering, because I wanted to celebrate the family members who deserved recognition and inclusion. I hadn't mentioned my siblings' vacation plans specifically, but I hadn't hidden my motivations either. 3 weeks before Memorial Day, I got a call from Denise. "Vanessa, we've run into a problem with our vacation," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "What kind of problem?" "The resort called us yesterday and said they have to cancel our reservations. Something about a private event booking the entire place for that weekend. They offered us a different weekend at a discount, but Kenneth's kids have soccer tournaments the rest of the month, and Marcus already put in for vacation time at work." I made appropriately sympathetic noises. "That's terrible. You must be so disappointed." "We are. The kids were really looking forward to it, and we'd already made all these plans." The resort said they'd been trying to reach the other families booked for that weekend, but apparently, everyone's having the same problem. "Have you tried looking for somewhere else?" "Everything decent is booked up for Memorial Day weekend. We waited too long to make backup plans." Denise sighed heavily. "I guess we'll just have to do something local this year." "I'm sorry it didn't work out," I said, and I actually meant it. I was angry with my siblings, but I didn't want their children to suffer for their parents' mistakes. "It's just so frustrating," Denise continued. "Amanda, the woman from the resort, said the private booking was made by someone planning a family reunion. Can you imagine having that kind of money to just buy out an entire resort?" "Some people are very fortunate," I agreed. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and thought about what I was doing. Part of me felt guilty about the deception, about letting my siblings struggle with disappointment while I held the solution in my hands. But a larger part of me remembered sitting in that dining room, listening to them laugh at the idea that I might be able to afford their exclusive vacation. They had made assumptions about my worth based on their limited understanding of my life. They had excluded me not because there wasn't room, but because they didn't think I belonged. They had treated me like a burden instead of a sister. Now they were getting a lesson in assumptions and the danger of judging people by appearances. I called Amanda at Pine Ridge Mountain Resort to confirm the final details of my reservation. Everything was set. The cabins were ready, the meals were planned, and the staff was prepared to welcome my group of 16 family members who rarely got treated like they mattered. "I just want to confirm," Amanda said, "that you're comfortable with the full balance being charged to your account next week." "Absolutely. And Amanda, I have one special request. If anyone calls asking about the private event or trying to book rooms for that weekend, please don't give out any information about who made the reservation." "Of course. We always maintain complete confidentiality for our private events." The week before Memorial Day, I got my nails done, bought a new sundress, and packed a suitcase full of clothes suitable for hiking, swimming, and dining at an upscale resort restaurant. I felt nervous and excited in a way I hadn't experienced in years. My phone rang constantly that week with calls from the family members who were joining me at Pine Ridge. Everyone was excited, grateful, and a little amazed that someone had thought to include them in something special. "I can't remember the last time I felt this wanted at a family event," Aunt Vivian told me during one of our calls. "That's exactly why we're doing this," I said. "Teresa called the night before we were supposed to leave. I have to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." "Okay. Is this whole thing about getting back at Kenneth, Denise, and Marcus for excluding you?" I thought about her question carefully. "Partly," I admitted. "But it's more about including people who deserve to be included. If I just wanted revenge, I could have done something cruel and petty. Instead, I decided to do something positive that happens to make a point." "What point?" "That family isn't just about who shares your DNA or lives the kind of life everyone else approves of. Family is about showing up for each other, accepting each other's differences, and making room at the table for everyone who wants to belong." Teresa was quiet for a moment. "You know they're going to figure out it was you eventually." "I'm counting on it." The next morning, I packed my car and drove 3 hours north to Pine Ridge Mountain Resort. The place was even more beautiful in person than it had been in the photos. The main lodge was built from local stone and timber, with huge windows that looked out over the lake and mountains. My cabin was spacious and comfortable, with a fireplace, a fully equipped kitchen, and a deck that faced the water. Amanda greeted me personally when I checked in, and she seemed genuinely excited about hosting our family reunion. "Your guests have been arriving all morning," she told me. "Everyone seems so happy to be here." I walked through the lodge and found my family members scattered around the common areas, getting acquainted and catching up. Aunt Vivian was holding court in the sitting area by the fireplace, telling stories about the old days to anyone who would listen. Jerome and David were out on the deck, taking pictures of the lake and mountains. Teresa was in the game room with her niece, playing pool and laughing about something. For the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. These were my people, the ones who had been judged, excluded, and written off by others. The ones who knew what it felt like to be on the outside looking in. The ones who understood that family should be about love and acceptance, not conformity and judgment. That afternoon, while my real family was settling into their cabins and exploring the resort, I got a text message from Marcus. "Still can't believe our vacation got canceled. Hope you're having a good weekend at home." I looked around at the beautiful lodge, at my family members laughing and enjoying themselves, at the lake sparkling in the afternoon sun. Then I typed back a simple response. "Having a wonderful weekend. Hope you find something fun to do locally. I turned off my phone and went to join Aunt Vivian on the deck. She had a glass of sweet tea in her hand and was watching the sun start to set behind the mountains. "This is the nicest thing anyone has done for this family in years," she said without looking at me. "You deserve it," I told her. "We all do," she said, "but it took you to make it happen." As the sun disappeared behind the peaks and the first stars started to appear in the clear mountain sky, I realized that my siblings had been right about one thing. This was a vacation for people with actual families. The only difference was that my definition of family was bigger, kinder, and more inclusive than theirs. And tomorrow, when they inevitably discovered what I had done, they were going to learn that sometimes the people you underestimate are the ones with the most surprises up their sleeves. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright over Pine Ridge Mountain Resort. I woke up in my comfortable cabin to the sound of birds singing and water lapping gently against the shore. For a moment, I forgot about everything except how peaceful it felt to wake up somewhere beautiful without any obligations or expectations weighing on me. Then I remembered where I was and why I was here, and a smile spread across my face that probably would have worried my siblings if they could have seen it. I made coffee in my cabin's kitchen and stepped out onto the deck to watch the morning mist rise off the lake. In the distance, I could see other early risers from my group starting their day. Jerome and David were already out in one of the resort's kayaks, paddling slowly around the calm water and pointing out wildlife to each other. Aunt Vivian was sitting on the main lodge's porch with her coffee and what looked like a crossword puzzle, probably having been awake since 5 in the morning, like she always was. My phone had been buzzing since I woke up, but I'd been ignoring it. When I finally checked my messages, I found 3 texts from Denise, 2 from Kenneth, and 5 missed calls from Marcus. All sent between 7 and 8 in the morning, which was unusual since none of my siblings were typically early risers on weekends. The first text from Denise simply said, "Call me when you get this." The second one, sent 20 minutes later, was more urgent. "Vanessa, we need to talk. Something weird is happening." Kenneth's messages were similar. "Are you awake? Need to ask you something." And then, "This is important. Please call." Marcus had left a voicemail that I played while sipping my coffee on the deck. His voice sounded confused and a little suspicious. "Hey, Vanessa, it's me. Listen, something really strange happened yesterday, and I wanted to run it by you. You know how our resort reservation got canceled because of some private family reunion? Well, Janet was talking to her friend who works at a travel agency, and she did some digging. Apparently, the person who booked Pine Ridge for the whole weekend paid cash up front, like the entire $58,000. Who has that kind of money just lying around? And why would they book a whole resort for a family reunion? It doesn't make sense. Call me back." $58,000. Trust Marcus to focus on the money first and ask questions later. I deleted the voicemail and finished my coffee before deciding how to respond. The truth was, I wasn't ready for the confrontation yet. I wanted one more day of peace with my chosen family before dealing with the drama that was inevitably coming. So I sent a group text to all 3 siblings. "At the community center working on end-of-month reports, phone service is spotty. We'll call you later." It wasn't technically a lie. I did have end-of-month reports to finish, and I could work on them from anywhere. The phone service comment was creative interpretation, but not completely false. I spent the morning with my family at the resort, and it was everything I'd hoped it would be. We had breakfast together in the main dining room, where the chef had prepared a spread that included everything from fresh fruit and pastries to made-to-order omelets and pancakes. Aunt Vivian told stories about our grandmother that I'd never heard before. Teresa's niece, 16-year-old Amber, was fascinated by the family history and kept asking questions about relatives she'd only heard mentioned in passing. "Why don't we do this more often?" asked my cousin Jerome, looking around the table at our group of 16. Why do we only see each other at funerals and weddings? Because some people think family gatherings are only for people who fit a certain mold, Aunt Catherine said pointedly. She'd been particularly bitter about being excluded from family events since her husband died, and I could tell this weekend was healing something in her that had been broken for a long time. After breakfast, some of the group went hiking on one of the resort's trails, while others took advantage of the spa services. I found myself sitting by the lake with my second cousin Brenda, who had been clean and sober for 3 years, but was still treated like a pariah by most of the family. I keep waiting for the catch, Brenda told me, watching the water sparkle in the sunlight. This is too good to be true. There has to be something you're not telling us. No catch, I assured her. I wanted to do something nice for the people in our family who deserve recognition. But why? And how can you afford this? No offense, but community center jobs don't usually come with resort buying money. I'd been dreading this conversation, but I realized Brenda deserved honesty. She'd been through enough deception and half-truths in her life. My grandmother left me some money when she died, I said simply. More than I ever expected. I've been saving it for something meaningful, and this felt right. Brenda nodded slowly. Grandma Rose always liked you best. She used to say you were the only one who visited her because you wanted to, not because you needed something. She left me a letter with the inheritance, said she'd been watching the family for years, seeing who showed up and who didn't, who judged and who accepted. She wanted her money to go to someone who understood what family really means. And you decided to spend it on all of us misfits and outcasts? I decided to spend it on the people who make this family interesting and real instead of perfect and fake. Around noon, my phone started ringing again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize, with a local area code. I almost didn't answer it, but something made me pick up. Hello, is this Vanessa Williams? The voice was professional and unfamiliar. Yes, this is Vanessa. This is Amanda from Pine Ridge Mountain Resort. I'm sorry to bother you on your weekend, but I have a rather unusual situation. I've had several people call this morning asking about your private event. They seem to know quite a bit about the booking, and they're claiming to be family members who should have been invited. My stomach dropped. What kind of questions are they asking? They want to know who made the reservation, how many people are in your party, and whether there might be some kind of mistake with the booking. One gentleman in particular has been quite persistent. He says his name is Marcus Williams and that he's your brother. Of course, it was Marcus. He'd never been able to let anything go, especially when money was involved. I can assure you there's no mistake, I told Amanda. But I would appreciate it if you could continue to maintain confidentiality about the details of our reservation. Absolutely. That's our policy regardless. But I wanted to give you a heads up that they seem quite determined to get information. After I hung up, I realized my peaceful family weekend was about to become much more complicated. I gathered my group together in the main lodge and explained the situation. So they know someone in the family booked this place, but they don't know it was you? Teresa asked. Not yet, but Marcus is like a dog with a bone when he gets suspicious about something. It's only a matter of time. What do you want to do? Asked Jerome. We could cut the weekend short if you think there's going to be drama. Absolutely not, Aunt Vivian said firmly. We are not running away from those 3 spoiled children just because they can't handle not being the center of attention. I agree with Aunt Vivian, said Aunt Catherine. We have every right to be here, and we're not doing anything wrong. I looked around at my chosen family, these wonderful people who had been cast aside and overlooked for so many years. They were all looking at me with trust and support, waiting for me to decide how to handle the situation that was clearly coming. We stay, I said. We finish our weekend, we enjoy every minute of it, and when my siblings figure out what happened, we handle it with dignity and grace. And if they don't handle it with dignity and grace, asked Brenda. Then we remind them that actions have consequences, and treating family members like they don't matter is one of those actions. The afternoon passed pleasantly despite the undercurrent of tension I felt about my buzzing phone. We had a late lunch on the deck overlooking the lake, and several people tried their hand at fishing from the resort's private dock. Amber caught a small bass that she was so excited about, she took about 50 pictures of it before throwing it back. Around 4 o'clock, Amanda approached me discreetly while I was reading on the deck. "Ms. Williams, I'm sorry to bother you again, but we have a situation at the front desk." "Let me guess. My brother Marcus?" "Actually, all three of them. They drove up here and are demanding to speak with whoever is in charge of the private event. They're claiming there's been some kind of family emergency and they need to contact one of the guests." I felt my heart start beating faster, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. The waiting was over. The confrontation I'd been both dreading and anticipating was finally here. Where are they now? "In the lobby. I've told them I can't give out any information about our guests, but they're refusing to leave. One of them mentioned calling the police if we don't cooperate." Typical Marcus, always threatening to escalate things when he didn't get his way immediately. "I'll handle this," I told Amanda. "Thank you for protecting our privacy as long as you could." I stood up and smoothed down my sundress, checked my reflection in the window, and walked into the lobby like I was heading to a business meeting instead of a family confrontation that had been building for months. They were standing near the front desk, and I could hear Marcus's voice before I could see him clearly. "Look, we know our sister is here. Her car's not at her house. She's not answering her phone, and she's been acting weird all week. If she's in some kind of trouble, we have a right to know. Sir, as I've explained, I cannot give out information about our guest's identity or whereabouts. If you'd like to leave a message, I can see that it gets delivered." "This is ridiculous," Denise was saying. "We're family. We're not stalkers or criminals. We just want to make sure she's okay." That's when I stepped into view, and the lobby fell completely silent. Kenneth saw me first, and his mouth literally fell open. Denise turned around and blinked like she was seeing a mirage. Marcus just stared at me for a full 10 seconds before finding his voice. "Vanessa, what are you doing here?" "I'm enjoying a family reunion weekend at the resort I booked," I said calmly. The silence that followed was so complete. I could hear the lobby's grandfather clock ticking and the distant sound of someone laughing by the pool. "You booked?" Denise whispered. "You mean?" Kenneth started, then stopped, his brain clearly struggling to process what I was telling them. Marcus, predictably, went straight to the financial implications. "You're the one who spent $58,000 to book this whole place?" "That's right." "How?" The word came out like an accusation. "You don't have that kind of money. You can't have that kind of money." "Actually, I can and I do. Grandma Rose left me her life savings when she died. I've been very careful with it, and I decided this was something worth spending it on." "Grandma Rose left you money?" Denise's voice was getting higher with each word. "How much money?" "Enough to do this without worrying about the cost." "But why?" Kenneth asked, and for the first time he sounded more confused than angry. "Why would you book the same resort for the same weekend? Were you trying to ruin our vacation?" I looked at my three siblings, standing there in their casual weekend clothes, their faces showing a mixture of shock, confusion, and growing anger. These were the people who had raised me, who had shared holidays and birthdays and family traditions with me for over 50 years. These were also the people who had laughed at me for thinking I could afford their exclusive vacation, who had told me it was for people with actual families. "I didn't book it to ruin anything," I said. "I booked it to celebrate family, the family members who usually get left out, overlooked, or excluded from gatherings like this." "What do you mean?" Denise asked. "I mean Aunt Vivian, who you never invite to anything because she speaks her mind. I mean my cousin Jerome, who you barely acknowledge because he's gay. I mean Aunt Catherine, who got dropped from family events when Uncle Robert died because she's not blood family. I mean all the people who don't fit your narrow definition of what family should look like. Marcus was turning red in the face. So this is about revenge? You spent almost $60,000 to get back at us for not inviting you to our vacation? This is about inclusion. This is about showing love and respect to family members who deserve it. And yes, Marcus, it's also about proving a point. What point? That your assumptions about people can be very, very wrong. That's when Aunt Vivian appeared in the lobby, probably drawn by the sound of raised voices. She took one look at the scene and smiled in a way that reminded me exactly why my siblings found her intimidating. Well, well, she said, walking up to our group with the confidence of someone who had been waiting for this moment for years. Look who decided to show up to the family reunion after all. Aunt Vivian? Kenneth looked like he'd seen a ghost. Hello, Kenneth, Denise, Marcus. She nodded to each of them with formal politeness. I was wondering if you three would figure out what Vanessa had done and come looking for her. You knew about this? Denise asked. Honey, I helped plan it. We all did. This has been the most wonderful family gathering I've been to in 20 years, specifically because certain people weren't here to make everyone else feel unwelcome. Teresa appeared next, followed by Jerome and David, then Aunt Catherine and several others from our group. Within a few minutes, my entire chosen family was gathered in the lobby, facing off against my three siblings like something out of a Western movie. I can't believe this, Marcus said, looking around at all the faces. You invited everyone except us? I invited everyone who has been excluded from family events over the years, I corrected. If that doesn't include you, maybe you should ask yourself why. We've never excluded anyone, Denise protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Really? Aunt Catherine stepped forward. When was the last time I was invited to a family gathering? When was the last time anyone in this family called to check on me or include me in holiday plans? Or me, added Jerome. When was the last time any of you made an effort to get to know David, even though we've been together for 12 years? And what about Brenda? Teresa chimed in. She's been sober for 3 years, but you still treat her like she's going to steal the silverware if you invite her to dinner. My siblings looked around at the group of family members they had been ignoring, dismissing, or outright excluding for years. For the first time since this confrontation started, they seemed to be understanding the magnitude of what they had done. We didn't mean. Kenneth started, then stopped when he realized how weak that sounded. You didn't mean to exclude us? Aunt Vivian asked with devastating politeness. You just accidentally forgot to invite us to family gatherings for years at a time? It's not that simple, Denise said defensively. Family events are complicated. You have to consider everyone's feelings, everyone's situations. Whose feelings? I asked. Because it seems like you only considered your own. You decided who belonged and who didn't based on your own comfort level and your own biases. Marcus was still fixated on the money aspect. I still can't believe you had that kind of money and never told us. We're your family. We should have known. Why? I asked. So you could treat me differently? So you could start seeing me as someone worth including in your plans? So you could ask me for loans or expect me to pay for things? That's not fair, Kenneth protested. What's not fair is assuming someone can't afford to participate in family activities based on their job title. What's not fair is laughing at them when they ask to be included. What's not fair is telling them that a family vacation is for people with actual families. Denise had the grace to look ashamed when I repeated her words back to her. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again when she realized she couldn't explain away what she'd said without making it worse. The lobby fell quiet again, except for the sound of new guests checking in at the other end of the front desk and trying to pretend they weren't listening to our family drama. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked finally. "Now you can leave, and let us finish our family reunion in peace," Aunt Vivian said crisply. "Or you can stay and try to explain to your children why their aunt and great-aunt and cousins are all together at a resort, having a wonderful time without them." "The kids," Denise said suddenly, her face going pale. "Oh God, the kids are going to ask so many questions." "Then you better think of some good answers," Teresa said unsympathetically. I looked at my 3 siblings and felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because they were finally understanding the consequences of their actions, but sadness because it had come to this. Because they had made me choose between dignity and family harmony, and I had chosen dignity. "I want you to understand something," I said, my voice quiet but clear. "I didn't do this to hurt you. I did this to help people who have been hurt by being excluded and dismissed. If you feel hurt by what I've done, then maybe you understand a little bit of what it feels like to be on the outside looking in." "So this is payback," Marcus said. "This is education," I corrected. "This is what happens when you underestimate people and make assumptions about their worth based on limited information." Kenneth, who had been quiet for several minutes, finally spoke up. "Vanessa, I'm sorry. I'm sorry we made you feel like you weren't welcome. I'm sorry we assumed things about your finances, and I'm really sorry we laughed at you when you asked about joining us." His apology sounded genuine, and I felt some of the anger I'd been carrying start to ease. "Thank you," I said. "That means something." Denise nodded slowly. "I'm sorry too. You're right. We did exclude people, and we did make assumptions. We got comfortable with our little group and forgot that family is supposed to be bigger than that." Marcus was still struggling with the concept that his assumptions could be wrong, but even he managed a grudging, "I guess we messed up." Aunt Vivian looked around at the group of family members who had been brought together by exclusion and held together by understanding. "The question is," she said, "what are you going to do differently going forward?" "What do you mean?" Denise asked. "I mean, are you going to go home and forget this conversation happened? Or are you going to actually change how you treat family members who don't fit your idea of normal?" It was a fair question, and I could see my siblings thinking about it seriously for the first time. "We want to do better," Kenneth said finally. "But we're not sure how." "Start by including people instead of excluding them," Jerome suggested. "Start by asking instead of assuming. And start by recognizing that different doesn't mean less than," added Aunt Catherine. Amanda, the resort manager, approached our group diplomatically. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have other guests arriving, and the lobby is getting quite crowded. Is there somewhere more private where you could continue this conversation?" "Actually," I said, "we were just finishing up. My siblings were about to leave so we could get back to our family reunion." But Marcus stepped forward with a look on his face that I hadn't seen since we were children, and he was about to ask for something he really wanted but wasn't sure he deserved. "Could we?" he started, then stopped and tried again. "Would it be possible for us to join you? I know we don't deserve it after how we acted, but our kids are at Janet's mother's house for the weekend, and we're just sitting at home feeling terrible about this whole situation." I looked around at my chosen family, the people who had been excluded and dismissed for years. They were the ones who should decide whether to extend grace to the people who had hurt them. "It's not up to me," I told Marcus. "It's up to them." Aunt Vivian spoke first. "I suppose everyone deserves a chance to learn from their mistakes." Jerome nodded. "As long as they understand that this weekend is about celebrating the people who usually get overlooked. And as long as they don't expect to take over or change the dynamic we've built," added Teresa. Aunt Catherine was the most hesitant. I need to know this isn't just guilt talking. I need to know you actually want to be here with us, not just that you feel bad about excluding us. Kenneth looked directly at her. Aunt Catherine, I should have called you after Uncle Robert died. I should have made sure you knew you were still part of this family. I was wrong and I'm sorry. Denise turned to Jerome and David. I'd like to get to know you both better. I'd like to understand what your lives are like and what makes you happy. Marcus was still struggling, but he managed to say, I don't understand everything about all of you, but I'm willing to learn if you're willing to teach me. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The resort is fully booked, I told them, but you could drive home and come back tomorrow for the day. We're having a farewell brunch before everyone heads home. Or, Amanda interjected politely, if you don't mind staying in town overnight, there's a bed and breakfast about 10 minutes away that has a few rooms available. You could come back here for dinner tonight and join the group. My siblings looked at each other, and I could see them making the kind of wordless communication that comes from growing up together. We'd like that, Denise said, if everyone else is okay with it. One by one, the members of my chosen family nodded their agreement. Not enthusiastically, but with the kind of cautious optimism that comes from years of disappointment, followed by the possibility of something better. All right then, I said, but understand that this weekend has been about celebrating people who usually don't get celebrated. If you join us, you're here to listen and learn, not to take over. We understand, Kenneth said. As my siblings left to find accommodation for the night, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that the confrontation was over, satisfaction that they had finally understood the impact of their actions, and cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of a more inclusive and authentic family dynamic. You did good, honey, Aunt Vivian said, patting my arm as we watched them drive away. We'll see, I said. Actions matter more than apologies. That evening, my siblings returned for dinner, and I watched them navigate conversations with family members they had been ignoring for years. Kenneth asked Aunt Catherine about her volunteer work at the animal shelter. Denise seemed genuinely interested in hearing about Jerome's work as a pediatric nurse. Marcus actually listened when Brenda talked about her recovery journey without looking uncomfortable or trying to change the subject. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward moments and forced conversations. But there was also genuine effort, and for the first time in years, I felt like maybe our family gatherings could be about bringing people together instead of keeping them apart. The next morning at brunch, as we all prepared to go our separate ways, Marcus pulled me aside. I need to ask you something, he said. How much money did Grandma Rose actually leave you? I smiled. Enough to do this again next year if necessary. His eyes widened. You're not serious. I'm completely serious. I have enough money to book this resort every Memorial Day weekend for the next 15 years if that's what it takes to teach this family how to be inclusive. You wouldn't. Try me. Marcus stared at me for a moment, then started laughing. Not the cruel laughter from that night in Denise's dining room, but genuine amusement at the realization that his little sister had completely outmaneuvered him. You know what? He said. I think I'm starting to like this new version of you. This isn't a new version, I told him. This is who I've always been. You just never bothered to pay attention before. As I drove home that Sunday afternoon, I reflected on the weekend and what it had accomplished. I had spent $58,000 to prove a point, and while that might seem excessive to some people, it had been worth every penny. My chosen family had experienced a weekend where they were valued, included, and celebrated. My siblings had learned that their assumptions about people could be dangerously wrong. And I had discovered that standing up for yourself and others doesn't always require confrontation and anger. Sometimes it requires planning, patience, and the willingness to put your money where your values are. When I got home to my quiet house on Elm Street, I found a voicemail from Denise waiting for me. Vanessa, it's me. I just wanted to say thank you for this weekend. I learned a lot about our family and about myself. I hope we can do better going forward. And I wanted you to know that I'm planning a 4th of July barbecue at my house, and I want everyone to come. Everyone. I'm going to start making calls tomorrow to invite all the people we should have been including all along. I sat in my kitchen with my cup of tea and smiled. Maybe, just maybe, my expensive lesson had worked. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Kenneth. Vanessa, I have something to tell you. Janet's pregnant. Congratulations, that's wonderful news. We want you to be the godmother. I was quiet for a moment, surprised by the gesture. Kenneth, you don't have to do that just because you feel guilty about what happened. This isn't about guilt. This is about recognizing that you're the kind of person we want our children to learn from. You showed us what it means to stand up for family, what it means to be generous and inclusive and brave. Those are the values we want our kids to have. After I hung up, I sat in my garden and thought about Grandma Rose. She had saved her money for 50 years, living modestly so she could leave something meaningful behind. She had chosen to give that money to me because she believed I would use it wisely. I had spent $58,000 on a single weekend, which might seem like poor financial planning to some people. But I had used that money to change my family's dynamic, to give recognition to people who deserved it, and to prove that underestimating someone can be a very expensive mistake. Grandma Rose would have approved. She had always said that money was just a tool and the real measure of wealth was how you treated the people around you. I had used her gift to teach my family that lesson, and in doing so, I had honored her memory and created the possibility of a better future for all of us. That seemed like a pretty good return on investment to me,